Have you ever noticed how some people seem immune to insults, betrayal, and criticism? They don't fight back, don't defend themselves, don't even seem affected. They simply remain unmoved, as if nothing can reach them. What if I told you that this isn't indifference or emotional numbness, but the deepest form of psychological mastery? When you stop taking things personally, you don't just change how you react. You become fundamentally untouchable. But here's what most people don't understand. Becoming untouchable isn't about building thicker skin or learning to ignore pain. It's about something far more profound, dissolving the very part of yourself that can be wounded in the first place. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when nothing irritates you anymore? What happens when you realize that being hurt isn't about what others do? It's about what you're protecting inside yourself. This is the secret that transforms victims into masters. Wounds are not inflicted by others. They're the echo of an ego that refuses to dissolve. The illusion of external wounds. We've been conditioned to believe that when someone hurts us, we are the victim of their actions. Society teaches us to seek justice, demand apologies, and practice forgiveness as if it's a noble gift we bestow upon our offenders. We have entire therapeutic frameworks built around healing from what others did to us. But this entire paradigm is built on a fundamental misunderstanding that keeps us trapped in perpetual victimhood. No one can truly hurt you unless you carry within yourself an ego that needs protection. This isn't philosophical theory, it's psychological reality. Every time you feel insulted, betrayed, or disrespected, ask yourself this crucial question: what part of me is being threatened? Your pride? Your expectations? Your need for validation? Your self-image? Your sense of importance? These are all components of what Jung called the ego structure, the false self that demands recognition and fears dissolution. The ego is not your true identity. It's a collection of roles, images, beliefs, and attachments you've accumulated over time. It's the voice that says, "I am important, I deserve respect, I should be treated better, my feelings matter, I have rights." This ego creates a psychological target that others can hit. But here's the revelation that changes everything. When you have nothing to protect, there's nothing to wound. Imagine a person who carries no self-image, no attachment to how others perceive them, no dependency on external validation, no investment in being right or important. To such a person, an insult is just sound waves, betrayal is just an event, criticism is just information passing through awareness. Without an ego to defend, there's no pain to experience. This isn't suppression or denial. It's the absence of the very mechanism that creates psychological suffering, the anatomy of taking things personally. Let's dissect what actually happens when you take something personally. Someone says or does something, and within milliseconds, your mind creates a story. They're attacking me. They don't respect me. They're trying to hurt me. This reflects badly on me. But notice what's happening here. You're making their action about you, your worth, your identity, your feelings. Jung understood that individuation, becoming your authentic self, requires the dissolution of these protective ego structures. Most people spend their lives building thicker armor around their wounded ego, creating elaborate defense mechanisms, learning to fight back more effectively. But true power comes from having nothing that needs armor. Think about the last time someone hurt your feelings. What actually happened? They said words or performed actions, but the pain came from the collision between their behavior and your expectations, your self-concept. You need to be seen in a certain way. The wound wasn't created by them. It was revealed by them. They simply exposed a part of your ego that was already vulnerable already demanding protection. This is why the same comment can devastate one person and bounce off another completely. The difference isn't in the comment. It's in the psychological structure receiving it. A person with a strong attachment to being seen as intelligent will be wounded by being called stupid. A person with no such attachment will hear the same words as meaningless noise. The ego's desperate need for significance. The ego survives by making everything about itself. It needs to be the center of every story, the victim of every slight, the hero of every triumph, the injured party in every conflict. This is why we take things personally, because the ego interprets every external event as either validating or threatening its existence. When someone ignores you, the ego says they're disrespecting me. When someone disagrees with you, the ego says they're attacking my intelligence. When someone leaves you, the ego says they're rejecting my worth. But what if none of these interpretations are true? What if their actions have nothing to do with you at all? Others' actions reveal more about their internal state than about your worth. Their criticism becomes information about their standards. Their anger becomes data about their triggers. Their rejection becomes insight into their preferences. None of it defines you. But the ego can't accept this because it would mean losing its central position in the narrative. Society celebrates the wounded ego, treating it as a victim deserving sympathy and compensation. We're taught that someone hurt you, and you have the right to feel pain, seek justice, demand apologies. We have entire industries built around validating wounded egos, therapy that focuses on what was done to you, social movements that center on victimhood, legal systems that monetize emotional damage. But this victim mentality keeps you trapped in a cycle of vulnerability. Every time you take something personally, you're announcing to the world exactly where your ego is located and how to manipulate it. You become predictable, controllable, and perpetually at the mercy of others' actions. If this psychological insight is resonating with you, and you want to learn more about breaking free from these mental patterns, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Now, let me show you exactly how manipulators exploit these psychological vulnerabilities. The manipulator's playbook. The most manipulative people instinctively understand this psychological dynamic. They know how to find your ego attachments and press against them to provoke reactions. They study your triggers, your insecurities, your need for validation, and they use this information as weapons. They might attack your appearance if you're vain, question your intelligence if you pride yourself on being smart, ignore you if you need attention, criticize your work if you derive identity from your achievements. Your anger, your hurt feelings, your defensive responses. These all reveal the exact coordinates of your psychological weak points. When you stop taking things personally, you become unreadable, unpredictable, and ultimately uncontrollable. Manipulators lose their power over you because they can't find anything to grab onto. You become like water. Their attacks pass right through you without leaving a mark. The paradox of invulnerability. Here's the paradox that most people miss. Your invulnerability doesn't come from building stronger walls. It comes from having nothing that needs walls. This isn't about becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. It's about recognizing that you're not your reputation, your roles, your relationships, or your achievements. You are the awareness that observes all of these things. When someone attacks your reputation, they're not attacking you. They're attacking a concept. When someone rejects your love, they're not rejecting your essence. They're responding to their own capacity and preferences. When someone criticizes your work, they're not diminishing your worth. They're expressing their subjective evaluation. This recognition is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it frees you from the exhausting task of defending an image that isn't even real. Terrifying because it means letting go of the very thing you thought you were. The death of the false self. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as separating from the collective unconscious and its projections. Most people live their entire lives reacting to others' opinions, seeking approval, fearing rejection, trying to maintain and protect their self-image. But this self-image is a prison disguised as an identity. Your true self needs no defense because it cannot be attacked. Only the false self, the ego, can be wounded. The true self is like space itself. You can fill it with objects, but you cannot damage the space. You can attack someone's roles, opinions, achievements, or relationships, but you cannot touch their essential being. This doesn't mean becoming passive or allowing others to mistreat you. It means responding from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. When you're not taking things personally, you can address situations objectively. You can set boundaries without anger, correct misconceptions without defensiveness, and walk away from toxicity without drama. Your responses become strategic rather than emotional, effective rather than reactive. The transformation begins with a simple recognition. Most of what you thought was you was actually just a collection of wounds, defenses, and reactions. Beneath all of that is something unshakable, untouchable, and ultimately free. The practical path to becoming untouchable. Understanding the theory is one thing. Implementing it is another. Here's how to systematically dissolve the ego structures that make you vulnerable to taking things personally. Phase 1. Recognition and awareness, weeks 1 to 4. Daily trigger mapping exercise. Every time you feel hurt, offended, or reactive, immediately pause and ask, what specific part of my self-image is being threatened? What story am I telling myself about what this means? What do I need this person to think, feel, do for me to feel okay? What would happen if I didn't take this personally? Keep a trigger journal where you record the triggering event, your immediate emotional reaction, the ego story you created, what you were trying to protect, how you could reframe it non-personally. The observer practice. 3 times daily, spend 5 minutes observing your thoughts without identifying with them. Notice how your mind constantly creates stories about what things mean about you. Practice saying, I notice I'm having the thought that, instead of I am, or they are. Identity detachment exercise. Make a list of all the roles, labels, and identities you carry: parent, professional, attractive person, intelligent person, good person, etc. Each day, practice mentally releasing attachment to one of these identities. Ask yourself, who would I be without this identity? What will be different? Phase 2. Ego dissolution, weeks 5 to 12. The Not About Me challenge. For 1 full week, interpret every negative interaction as having nothing to do with you personally. When someone is rude, assume they're having a bad day. When someone criticizes you, assume they're expressing their personal preferences. When someone rejects you, assume they're responding from their own limitations or circumstances. Notice how this reframing changes your emotional state and responses. Expectation inventory. List all your expectations of how others should treat you. They should be respectful. They should appreciate my efforts. They should be grateful. They should be fair. They should understand me. They should value what I value. Practice releasing 1 expectation per week. Notice how much of your suffering comes from these unmet expectations rather than from actual events. The projection exercise. When someone triggers you, ask, what quality in myself am I seeing reflected in them? Jung taught that we often project our own shadow qualities onto others. The things that irritate us most in others are often aspects of ourselves we haven't accepted. Phase 3. Response mastery, weeks 13 to 24. Strategic response training. Instead of reacting emotionally to provocations, practice these strategic responses. For insults, that's an interesting perspective, or simply no response at all. For criticism, thank you for the feedback without defending or explaining. For rejection, I understand without trying to change their mind. For unfair treatment, address the behavior, not the perceived disrespect. The energy conservation protocol. Recognize that every time you take something personally, you're giving away your energy. Start treating your emotional energy as a finite resource that should only be invested in what truly matters to your growth and goals. Practice asking, is this worth my energy, before engaging with any provocation. Boundary setting without ego. Learn to set boundaries from a place of self-care rather than wounded pride. I don't engage in conversations that involve personal attacks. I choose not to be around people who consistently disrespect boundaries. I'm not available for drama or manipulation. Notice the difference between boundaries, protecting your energy and well-being, and walls, protecting your ego from perceived threats. If you're finding these practical strategies valuable and want to master the art of psychological invulnerability, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our advanced techniques. Your journey to becoming untouchable is just beginning. Phase 4, Integration in Mastery, months 7 to 12. Advanced non-reactivity training. Deliberately expose yourself to mild provocations while practicing non-personal responses. Read comments on controversial topics without getting triggered. Engage with difficult people while maintaining emotional neutrality. Receive criticism without defending or explaining. Be ignored or excluded without creating stories about what it means. The compassion paradox. As you become less personally reactive, you'll naturally develop more genuine compassion. When you're not defending your ego, you can see others' behavior as expressions of their own pain, fear, or limitation rather than attacks on you. Practice responding to difficult people with curiosity rather than defensiveness. I wonder what's driving this behavior, instead of how dare they treat me this way. Teaching and modeling. Begin teaching others what you've learned, not through preaching, but through modeling. When others see your unshakable peace in the face of provocations, they'll naturally become curious about how you achieved it. Advanced practices for psychological invulnerability. The death meditation. Regularly contemplate the temporary nature of all identities, roles, and relationships. Everything you think defines you will eventually pass away. What remains when all these temporary identities dissolve? This practice helps you identify with your essential being rather than your temporary roles. The criticism fast. For 30 days, refuse to defend yourself against any criticism, whether fair or unfair. Simply receive it without explanation, justification, or counterattack. This breaks the ego's compulsive need to be right and to control others' perceptions. The approval detox. Gradually reduce your dependence on external validation. Week 1. Stop seeking compliments or praise. Week 2. Stop explaining your decisions to others. Week 3. Stop caring about others' opinions of your choices. Week 4. Stop trying to impress anyone. The mirror practice. When someone triggers you, immediately ask, how am I like this person? What quality are they reflecting back to me? This transforms triggers into opportunities for self-discovery rather than reasons for offense. The resistance you'll face. As you begin this transformation, expect resistance from both your own ego and from others around you. Your ego will fight desperately to maintain its central position in your psyche. It will create elaborate justifications for why you should take things personally, why you deserve better treatment, why you need to defend yourself. Others will also resist your change. People who are comfortable with your predictable reactions, your emotional availability, your vulnerability, to their manipulations will be disturbed by your new invulnerability. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, uncaring, or changed. This is their ego responding to the threat of your freedom. Some relationships will end during this process. People who were only interested in your ego reactions, who fed off your emotional responses, who used your triggers to control you, will lose interest when you become untouchable. This is not a loss. It's a liberation from toxic dynamics. The transformation from victim to master. The journey to becoming untouchable isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming indifferent. It's about recognizing the difference between your essential self and the psychological structures you've built around it. When someone criticizes you, feel the initial reaction, but don't identify with it. When someone rejects you, notice the ego's protest, but don't become it. When someone betrays you, observe the pain, but don't make it your identity. This is the ultimate form of self-mastery. Not controlling your reactions, but dissolving the reactor itself. When you achieve this, you don't just become harder to hurt. You become impossible to manipulate, control, or diminish. You become psychologically sovereign, emotionally free, and spiritually untouchable. People will notice this change in you. Some will be inspired by your peace and want to learn from you. Others will be threatened by your freedom and try to pull you back into reactive patterns. Your job is simply to remain centered in your essential being, untouchable and free. The ultimate freedom. When you stop taking things personally, you discover something profound. You are not what happens to you. You are how you choose to respond. And when you have nothing left to protect, you become truly free. This freedom isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of choice. You can still feel compassion, love, joy, and even appropriate anger when boundaries are crossed. But these emotions arise from your authentic self rather than from wounded ego reactions. You become like a mountain. Weather patterns may swirl around you, but you remain unmoved. Others' opinions, criticisms, rejections, and attacks become like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. Temporary phenomena that don't disturb your essential peace. This is the secret of the truly powerful. They have nothing to defend because they have nothing to lose. They're not their reputation, their achievements, their relationships, or their roles. They are the unchanging awareness in which all these temporary experiences arise and pass away. Are you ready to stop being a victim of others' actions? Are you willing to dissolve the ego that creates your wounds? The path to becoming untouchable begins with this recognition. The only person who can hurt you is the person you think you are. When you discover who you really are beneath all the roles and identities, you become truly invulnerable, not because you're protected, but because there's nothing left to protect. The journey begins now. Every trigger is an opportunity. Every offense is a teacher. Every wound is a doorway to freedom. Step through it and discover the untouchable peace that has always been your true nature. If you're ready to embark on this transformational journey and become psychologically untouchable, subscribe to this channel for more deep psychological insights that will change how you see yourself and the world. Hit that notification bell because your evolution into true personal power starts now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and let me know in the comments, what ego attachment are you ready to release first? Your untouchable self is waiting.